صدق الله العظيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. آمين. Before we continue where we left off from, there was one question from last week. There was a lot of talk about it, so I want to answer that before, inshallah. Many people come and ask me afterwards questions, and sometimes I share them because everybody can benefit. Other times there are questions that not everybody can benefit from, so we kind of filter them through. So the question was that 2 weeks ago, when I spoke about the Prophet ﷺ facing physical persecution, I had said that one day, Uqbah ibn Abi Mu'ayt, who was one of the chief enemies of the Prophet ﷺ, when he threw the remains of the camel on the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ made dua against him. And he made dua against 7 of the people that were sitting there. And he named each of them one by one. Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, Utayba, and Abu Jahl, and a few others. 7 total. The Prophet ﷺ took my name and he made dua against them. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said that on the day of Badr, the battle of Badr which is to come, that day I saw every one of them was killed by the Muslims on that day. In the battle, obviously. So it was a legal death. The question comes, is this not against the concept of the Prophet ﷺ being a mercy to mankind? If he is truly a mercy to mankind, how could he make dua against somebody and ask that Allah punish them? There's a contradiction there, right? But many things apparently seem contradictory, but when you really think about it, there is no contradiction. And the simple answer to this question is that a general rule, if we keep in mind, is that the Prophet ﷺ never made dua against anybody, generally speaking. That's the normal rule. And that's why in many instances when people would say something to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he would say in response that مَا بُعِثْتُ لَعَانًا وَمَا بُعِثْتُ فَحَّاشًا وَمَا بُعِثْتُ سَابًّا. I haven't been sent as someone who curses. I haven't been sent as someone who is vile in his speech. I've been sent as a mercy for mankind. But there are exceptions to this rule. This is a general rule, there are exceptions. And this scenario is one of those exceptions. And there are a few other scenarios that a handful in the Seerah where something similar happens. One of them, which we'll come to know, happens at the battle of which is known as Bi'r al-Ma'una. And there were a group of, there were 2 tribes by the name of Ra'an and Dhakwan that requested the Prophet ﷺ send them a delegation. And the Prophet ﷺ, he sent them 70, they were known as the 70 Qurra. Qurra is the plural of Qari, we hear it very often. These 70 were the finest of the Quranic reciters that the Prophet ﷺ had. And he sent them to these people. And these people, they ended up murdering these 70 without any reason. And Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, he says that the Prophet ﷺ, for 1 month after Fajr, he made qunut. Many of you may see that sometimes when things are tough for the Muslims, the Imam in the Fajr prayer, after the ruku' will make a dua out loud. Similar to what we do in Ramadan in the Witr prayer, right? This comes from there, this concept of a qunut. And he made dua against this tribe of Ra'an and Dhakwan. But as you can clearly see from here, this is a tribe that deliberately murdered 70 innocent Muslims that came to help them, and they murdered them in return. So they deserve the dua being made against them because the Prophet ﷺ is sent as a mercy to the entirety of humanity. The Prophet ﷺ, if you could say that he should not make dua against them because it goes against mercy, well, what about all those innocent people that were killed? All those innocent Qurra, and similarly, these 7 people in Quraysh that the Prophet ﷺ made dua against, they were not simply non-Muslims. And I clarified that as well. The Prophet ﷺ never made dua against a non-Muslim simply because they were a non-Muslim. When he made dua against a non-Muslim, he made it against someone who actively abused and actively went against Islam and tried everything to cause pain and affliction, physical, economical, all sorts of pain to the Muslims. That person that goes out of the way, that's an enemy of Islam, the Prophet ﷺ made dua against them. Those that physically tortured Bilal and them. So this dua of the Prophet ﷺ is actually a manifestation of his mercy. It doesn't contradict with his mercy, it is a manifestation of his mercy. Similar, a very easy parable for us to understand today is that there is no society and there is no legal system in which there is no punishment. If you can give an example historically that this society does not have any form of legal punishment. Punishment will always be there in order to keep the society safe. If somebody commits a crime, somebody commits a theft, he kills a person, he has to be given a punishment in order to maintain the peace and order of society. Otherwise, you would lose you would see innocent people being killed, there would be no law and order. So this is a simple point, I hope it's clarified, that the general rule is that Prophet ﷺ never made dua against anyone. When he made dua against someone, it was not because they were non-Muslim. It was because they actively fought against Islam, they abused the Muslims, and they caused great pain to the Muslims and to the companions, and they went out of their way to do this. They spent their wealth, their energy, as we spoke about many times, people like Abu Lahab and people like Abu Jahl, that was their their main thing. In their evenings they would spend it particularly engaged in this. So there is no contradiction between the Prophet ﷺ being a mercy and the Prophet ﷺ making dua against someone. Last week we had left off discussing the story of the migration to Abyssinia or Habasha. And we had gotten through a good part of the story. And to briefly summarize, and then we'll pick up from there, the Prophet ﷺ, after seeing that the Muslims are being persecuted, he began searching for a safe haven for some of the Muslims, where they can migrate to, where they can kind of be at peace and worship Allah in freedom and in peace. And after some research and some gathering some intelligence, he finds that Abyssinia, Habasha, has a king, as he would tell them that inna biha malikun adil, there is a just king there. So head down to Abyssinia. A group of Muslims go there. In short, they are given peace and asylum there. Then they hear a rumor that Quraysh has accepted Islam. So they come back and they find out this rumor is false. And they spent some time in Mecca. Some of them came back and some of them had stayed in Abyssinia. Now, after this, the Prophet ﷺ, after seeing that this immigration was successful, a new group of the companions, about 80 or 90 of them, they make a second immigration. So you have the first immigration, this is the second immigration that's made to Habasha. And then the Quraysh, they react, because they see that you have a good 100 Muslims have left, and the total amount of Muslims at that time, the total population of the Muslims is somewhere between 100 to 170. So nearly half the population has left. And so they put together a delegation and they make Amr ibn al-As their ambassador. And Amr ibn al-As, he goes along with a few others from Quraysh, and they take the finest of the camel hides that they had. They prepare very expensive gifts, and they head down to Habasha. And they begin to bribe all of the ministers in hopes that when we go in front of the emperor Al-Najashi, then we would be, what we say would be accepted. And they made a claim saying that these are our slaves, and they have done great injustices to us. It was a long khutbah that I read that Amr ibn al-As gave there. The Muslims, they were terrified at that moment, and what they did was that they ended up choosing Ja'far ibn Abi Talib as their leader and as their spokesperson. And there's a great lesson in this, that when the Muslims are to do something, we do something with mashwara, it is known. وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ, the Quran says that you have mutual consultation. There's not one person who simply has the say. You get the opinion of the entire community, of the people around you, and then you come to an educated decision. So, after consulting, they figured that Ja'far is a well-spoken young man, and he is the most fit to lead our delegation to the emperor. So they go there, and they also realize that we can be apologetic. What we believe is what we believe. And we speak with respect, we honor everyone, but at the same time, we speak the truth as well. So Ja'far, he speaks and he gives a long khutbah, in front of the emperor, and the emperor is moved deeply as he describes their condition of how they were before Islam, and then how the Prophet ﷺ came and changed them, and why they follow the Prophet ﷺ. He speaks about the different important matters of Islam. He speaks about their social condition before that. He speaks about morality and all of these important things. And Najashi is moved by that. Now he's moved by that, and what happens is that after this, he is asked that, can you recite something? And this is the last thing we discussed. Can you recite something for us from what is mentioned in your Quran, from what your messenger has been revealed? So Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, being a wise spokesperson, he read the beginning ayat of Surah Maryam that speak about Zakaria alayhi salam, and they speak about Maryam alayhi salam, and Isa alayhi salam and his miraculous birth, and Najashi was in tears. Now, this is the last thing we discussed. Moving on from here, Najashi, he saw no problem in the Muslims staying there. So he told Amr ibn al-As, he said that I see no problem. These Muslims are fit to stay under my protection. They can worship as they want, and no one should have an issue with it. What happens after is that Salama, who is narrating this entire story, she says that what happens is that when we're leaving from there, Amr ibn al-As, who was the ambassador from Quraysh, he says that, وَاللَّهِ لَآتِيَنَّهُ غَدًا عَنْهُمْ بِمَا أَسْتَأْصِلُ بِهِ خَطْرَاءَهُمْ. I won't leave them like this. I will come back tomorrow with a master plan that will finish these Muslims off and leave the Najashi, the emperor, with no choice but to send back these Muslims with us. So he thinks deeply, and he spends the entire night thinking of many different things. And his partner is there with him, and he tells them, he says, لَا تَفْعَلْ. He says, no, don't do it. فَإِنَّ لَهُمْ أَرْحَامًا. At the end of the day, they are our relatives. So why would we want to harm them, right? There was a difference. We came, we tried, nothing worked, but at least they're in peace. And let's just kind of leave them. He had his heart softened for the Muslims. And Amr ibn al-As, he declined. He said, no. He said, this is a disgrace. I am a successful ambassador. Every time Quraysh sends me for a mission, I come back successful. When I go back to the Quraysh, what will I say to them? That I failed in my mission? How can I go back to Quraysh and tell them that? So he says that I will, a foundational principle that is used against Muslims today, which is hate speech or misinformation, right? To go and say something that Muslims don't even believe in. So he says, I will say to them that these people, they insult and they speak in a very horrible manner about Isa alayhi salam. And not only that, but according to your theology, you're a Christian, so you believe in the Trinity, and the fact that they believe that Isa alayhi salam is not divine, he is not part of the divinity, that is blasphemous to your belief. So how can you entertain someone who holds a belief that goes against your belief, right? To incite the Najashi and his ministers against the Muslims. So the next day they reach there, and he gives a long khutbah Amr ibn al-As, and he says these sorts of things to him. He explains to him that these are people. You should think deeply before you let them stay here. They will affect your people. So once again, the Najashi, he calls out for the Muslims to come forth. And similarly, this time the Muslims, they gather and they say that who should we select as our Amir, as our leader, and they decide that Ja'far ibn Abi Talib is the most appropriate man for this job. He's done it once, we can try it again. So they select Ja'far again, radiallahu anhu, and Ja'far radiallahu anhu, he asks them, what should I say? When they asked me about Isa ibn Maryam, about Isa the son of Mary, what should I say? So they said to him, نَقُولُ وَاللَّهِ مَا قَالَ اللَّهِ. Look, it's very simple. We'll tell them what Allah says, وَمَا جَاءَنَا بِهِ نَبِيُّنَا, and what His Prophet has come to us with. كَائِنًا فِي ذَلِكَ مَا هُوَ كَائِنٌ. Whatever happens, happens. We cannot hide, we cannot lie and say that we don't believe this. We have to be honest about our belief. So when they enter, all the ministers have assembled, and Najashi is on his throne, and he asked them, what do you say about Isa ibn Maryam? So Ja'far radiallahu anhu, he says that I had recited those verses from Surah Maryam yesterday. And to add on to that, now that he has to state his creed and his belief, he says, نَقُولُ فِيهِ الَّذِي جَاءَنَا بِهِ نَبِيُّنَا صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. He says that whatever I will say about him is nothing other than what our Prophet ﷺ has taught us about him. Which is namely, we say that huwa Abdullah. We say that he is a slave of Allah. He is a servant of Allah. Meaning he is a human. He is not divine. وَرَسُولُهُ. He is not the son of God. وَرَسُولُهُ. And he is a messenger. And if he is a messenger, we accept and we respect all messengers. وَرُوحُهُ. And he is from the Spirit of Allah. Not to be misunderstood, what's meant by the Spirit of Allah is the idea of a ruh, and this is a whole topic on its own. But what's meant here specifically is that Jibreel alayhi salam, in this scenario, he is the one who blew the ruh, blew the soul into Isa alayhi salam. Right? When he came down to Maryam alayhi salam, because Isa alayhi salam's birth was not a normal birth. That is why the attribution of his ruh is done to Allah. Meaning Allah directly gave him life and ensouled him without the need of a father being there. That is why it is attributed to Allah. And along with that, وَكَلِمَتُهُ أَلْقَاهَا إِلَى مَرْيَمَ الْعَذْرَاءِ الْبَتَّةِ. And at the same time, to explain what we believe about Maryam alayhi salam, that she was al-'adhra al-batul, she was a pure, chaste woman, and she was a virgin, and the birth of Isa alayhi salam was a virgin. And Najashi, it seems that he was from amongst the minority Christian sects at that time that had some idea about there being tawheed and oneness of Allah in their religion, and they had held on to their original teachings. So he said, وَاللَّهِ مَا عَدَى عِيسَى بْنُ مَرْيَمَ مَا قُلْتَ هَذَا الْعُودِ. He bent down, he got up from his throne, he bent down and he picked up a twig. And he said, what you say and what Isa said, there is not even this much of difference between what you are telling me, what you are telling me that the Quran is saying, and what Isa alayhi salam is saying. And he said that what Isa alayhi salam brought to us, and what the Quran and your Prophet have brought to us, إِنَّهُمَا لَمِن مِشْكَاتٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. They are from one source, from one light, and they are essentially the same thing. And then he realizes that the ministers are getting upset at what he is saying. So he says, وَإِنَّ خَرْتُمْ. Even if you are not happy with what I'm saying, at the end of the day I make the decision. اِذْهَبُوا فَأَنْتُمْ شُيُومٌ بِأَرْضِي. Go forth and you are safe to live in this land. And not only are you safe in this land, مَنْ سَبَّكُمْ غَرِيمًا. Not only can somebody not come up from outside and take you with them and enslave you and all of that, but if someone is to even speak out against you, مَنْ سَبَّكُمْ, if someone simply curses you, غَرِيمًا, he'll end up paying for what he does. And then he turns to Amr ibn al-As, and obviously now you have to, somebody has given you this many gifts, you wouldn't be a man if you didn't turn back those gifts, right? Because essentially those were bribes. So he said to him, مَا أُحِبُّ أَنَّ لِي دَبَرًا مِنْ ذَهَبٍ. He said, look, I know you came with a lot of gifts, and I know you think that's important, but I'll tell you something. I am a man of principle. So, مَا أُحِبُّ أَنَّ لِي دَبَرًا مِنْ ذَهَبٍ. I don't care even if you give me a mountain of gold. وَأَنِّي آذَيْتُ رَجُلًا مِنْكُمْ. If you expect that you can pay me something, and in return I would harm the Muslims, I would hand them over to you, then you're dreaming. رُدُّوا عَلَيْهِمَا هَدَايَاهُمَا. And then he turned to his ministers and he said, everything that they gave you, give it all back. Not one thing. Don't keep a single thing. Whatever they gave you, give it all back. I don't want any of this to remain with my parliament, with my ministers. فَلَا حَاجَةَ لَنَا بِهَا فَوَاللَّهِ مَا أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِنِّي الرِّشْوَةَ حِينَ رَدَّ عَلَيَّ مُلْكِي. I won't get into the history of it, but very, very briefly, when An-Najashi was a young, when An-Najashi had newly gotten his throne, he was a young man. And he was challenged by one of his uncles. This is mentioned in the books of Tariq and Seerah, and Hisham mentions it, it's all there. That he was challenged to the throne because he was seen as a weak young man. And at that point, he was known for his justice and he was known to be an honest man. So he had prayed and he had said that, "Oh Allah, oh my Lord, if I am honest, and if I am just, then help me in my cause." And apparently it seemed that his uncle was powerful, but a long story short, Allah granted An-Najashi victory over his uncle so he could hold on to his father's legacy. So he said, at that time, I did not need any sort of bribery. And Allah helped me, and so Allah will help me now as well. فَخَرَجَ مِنْ عِنْدِهِ مَقْبُوحَيْنِ مَرْدُودًا عَلَيْهِمَا مَا جَاءَ بِهِ. And so the Amr ibn al-As and the other people of Quraysh, they went back, and with all the gifts that they had come with. And Salama says, وَأَقَمْنَا عِنْدَهُ بِخَيْرِ دَارٍ مَعَ خَيْرِ جَارٍ. She said that we would stay with An-Najashi and بِخَيْرِ دَارٍ مَعَ خَيْرِ جَارٍ. The best of places to stay was Habasha, was Abyssinia, and the best of neighbors, the best of people to live with were those people. And the Muslims would actually live in Abyssinia much later on into the Medinan period as well, as we will learn, right? Because you would think that once Medina is established, the Muslims should just immigrate. But since they were living there peacefully and they had freedom for their religion, and the Abyssinian people, they were on good terms with them, many Muslims actually would stay there until one of the final battles, as we'll learn, the Battle of Khaybar. Until that time, a good amount of the Muslims would stay in Abyssinia, and at different points, you would have different groups migrating to Medina at that time. And even Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, who gave this long khutbah, he would stay for a long while, until maybe the 6th or the 7th year after Hijrah. He would stay in Abyssinia, and then he would come out eventually, and the Prophet ﷺ would be so happy to see him. He said, "My brother is here," and he would call Ja'far and he would say that he is the closest in character to me, and he is the closest in the way that he looks as well. Because he was the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. But he was really someone who had gained his tarbiyah. He was brought up with the Messenger of Allah ﷺ in Dar al-Arqam, so he had the characteristics that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ had in some form. And there are many, I covered many lessons that we learned from Abyssinia last week. A few points that I had left out. The first being that the Muslims in Abyssinia, it was interesting how we think that when something is apparently bad, right, we think that there is only bad to come out of it. But Abyssinia is a great example of how something appears to be bad, but there is a great good that comes out of it. Look at the example of Amr ibn al-As, right? He comes to blame the Muslims, and the Muslims are scared, and they actually haven't gone public with what they believe. They simply stick to themselves. But Amr ibn al-As, he comes and he makes this allegation, due to which the Muslims are forced to come to the emperor's court and to clarify, therefore giving da'wah to everyone, right? They didn't intend to give that da'wah, but because Amr ibn al-As came, because they had to defend themselves, they would end up going to the court and explaining their religion, and the result of that would be that the entirety of Abyssinia would find out, right? Something is going on in the court of An-Najashi, everyone will find out. So even within that, there is a hidden good. Many times we don't see it at that time. When Ja'far and the Muslims are being called, they can only think that we'll be exiled from here. They don't have this in mind, but Allah plans in different ways. So something that apparently seems that there is only bad to come out of it, much good can come out of it. And we also learned that the Muslims, they have never had, in the history of Muslims, they have lived alongside with non-Muslims in many peaceful models in different societies. Muslims and non-Muslims have lived peacefully, and there has really been never been an issue. This is a modern kind of misunderstanding or misinformation that is spread against the Muslims. And Najashi, it seems that he accepted Islam. One, because of what he mentioned about Isa alayhi salam. So he was truly a monotheist. He was a muwahhid. He's someone who believed in the oneness of Allah. But he would actually write a letter to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or a few letters, affirming his faith. And the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when An-Najashi died, there was no one to pray janazah over him. There was no one in Abyssinia because there weren't many Muslims. And even if there were Muslims, they did not know that An-Najashi was a Muslim. But through wahi, through revelation, Allah Azza wa Jalla instructed Jibreel to go to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to tell the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that you are to pray janazah over An-Najashi. right? So the only time in the entire life of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ where a janazah is prayed and there is no body present, right? Because there were many instances where the Prophet ﷺ could have done that. Because a certain companion dies and he is in a different land, but the Prophet ﷺ would only pray the janazah if the body was there. But this one scenario was an exception. And from it we learn that if a Muslim does not have a funeral done for him, then with the agreement of all schools of thought, of all scholars, it is permissible to pray what is known as Salatul Janaza al-Ghaib, praying over the deceased that is absent, that is not there. This is something agreed upon if there was no janazah, if there is no one to pray janazah over there. And many a times cases like this will come where you will hear of a Muslim that was buried, right? And because of a will or because of some legal complication, perhaps he was a convert, he could not, a janazah could not be prayed. So in that case, even if we can either go to the graveyard and pray over there, or even in our masjid, we could pray over him. We learn this from the Seerah. And the Prophet ﷺ would pray janazah, and he said to them that, قُومُوا لِنُصَلِّ عَلَىٰ أَخِيكُمْ أَصْحُمًا, stand up and let's pray over your brother, Ashuma. So the fact that he's saying your brother and the fact that he's praying janazah over him means that he had definitely accepted Islam. This is Abyssinia. Now, what happens when Amr ibn al-As, he turns back and he goes back to Mecca, right? Because he's going back with all these gifts. He knows that he's failed, so-called in his so-called mission. He has to go back and he has to respond to Quraysh. While that is going on, and while he is facing the Quraysh, an interesting development starts for the Muslims that are in Mecca. So the Muslims that are in Abyssinia, they don't have to worry because they're safe under the Najashi. But what about the few Muslims that are left in Mecca, right? Because Islam has to, the Prophet ﷺ is trying his best to help out all of the Muslims. So Abu Bakr and Ali and all of them, radiallahu anhum, they're still stuck in Mecca, right? And they're not in Abyssinia, they're there with the Prophet ﷺ. And at that time, what can be done? The Prophet of Allah ﷺ, one night, or rather before this dua, the Prophet ﷺ, one day when he goes out, on a normal day, and this is one of the most interesting stories in the Seerah in my opinion. When he goes out one day and he is giving da'wah to people, he's speaking to them, it so happens that Abu Jahl is there. And Abu Jahl, he begins to curse the Messenger of Allah. And there is a slave girl of Abdullah ibn Jada'an, who was one of the tribe leaders. She is witnessing this entire scenario. And this day was one of the worst days in the life of the Messenger of Allah because there was no one that he would pass by except that person would be cursing the Messenger of Allah, right? So he's experiencing this. And Abu Jahl continues to do so, and the Messenger of Allah, he returns back home. Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib. Who is Hamza ibn Abdul? His uncle. And he is younger than Abdullah, the Prophet's father. He's the youngest of the Prophet's father's brothers. So he's actually very close in age, right? Because many of us may have that experience where a particular aunt or uncle are actually close to us in age because the children of that parent were spread across. So you had 5 or 6 or 7 kids and they were all of varying ages, right? So the Prophet, he's close to Hamza in age. And actually he is very close to Hamza because if you go back a few months when we discussed Halima Sa'diyah radiallahu anha, and we discussed how the Prophet ﷺ went to his foster mother, with his foster mother Halima, Hamza was also sent with the Prophet ﷺ, right? So he kind of grew up playing with him, right? So they have a very close relationship in that sense, right? Hamza radiallahu anhu, he has gone out, he was a warrior, and he was known to be a dominant warrior. To the point that in one of the wars before the Prophet ﷺ would receive revelation, he was known to have been the only man that fought with 2 swords. He was an expert swordsman. And he was an expert archer at the same time, which was very unique for people at that time, because even for those that watch sports or any particular talent, it's hard for one person to master different talents, right? You have a specialist, a person has a certain talent that they have, but they won't be able to do everything. But Hamza radiallahu anhu, he was known as a warrior, he was known as an archer, he was known as an expert swordsman, and he was known as an expert hunter. And he would go out and hunt. And one day, as he is hunting, he is coming back from his hunting trip, and he has his skins and he has his bow. And as he is passing by, he decides to stop by, and it was his custom, it was his habit, that he would stop by the haram. He would make a tawaf and thank Allah for coming back home safely. And he would then go home. While he is in the Kaaba, this slave girl, she can't hold herself. So she ends up saying, she says, "Oh Hamza, do you know what happened to your nephew today?" And Hamza radiallahu anhu, he's heard of something, but at this particular moment, he's interested. His heart is obviously softening because he's hearing about his nephew. She said that Abu Jahl cursed him for this amount of time, and he spit on him, and he was disgraced in a way that in my entire time in Mecca, I've never seen him disgraced in this way. The ultimate form of disgrace. And how could you, Hamza, be this powerful warrior, this expert hunter, and he was known as, the narration mentions, أَعَزَّ فَتًى فِي قُرَيْشٍ. He was known to be one of the most honorable. He was a young man, right? How can you claim to be this tough guy when your nephew is getting abused simply because he's believing in one God? And how could you not do anything? And Hamza radiallahu anhu, his blood begins to boil, right? So he said, "Tell me who else was there." She said, "Everyone was there." So he said, "Well, didn't anyone stop him?" She said, "No." "Who could stop Abu Jahl?" He said, "I'll stop Abu Jahl." So Abu Jahl was sitting in the Dar al-Nadwa with his buddies, and he goes up to him, and he has his bow in his hand, and he begins to beat Abu Jahl, to the point that blood is now trickling down on the face of Abu Jahl. And Abu Jahl says that, "Have you gone mad, Hamza? I am from your own tribe, and you're coming and attacking me?" And Hamza says, "This is for what you did to my nephew. And don't think that he has no one to protect him. And don't think that Abu Talib, that old man, is the only one that's protecting him. I too believe in his message." And he said it in the spur of the moment, right? Without really realizing what he's saying. He's like, "I believe in him too." And Abu Jahl, obviously, the people from his clan are coming out now. And Hamza says, "Come, I'll take all of you on," right? Hamza's a known warrior, so he said, "I'll take all of you on. Come, whoever wants to challenge me." And Abu Jahl says, "No, leave him, for I cursed his nephew. I cursed his nephew today in a way that I never cursed him before. So I don't even, at this point, I don't even mind." Right? He had some sort of ethics, Abu Jahl, in a weird way, where he understood that what he did today was so disgusting. It was so vile, he said that I can understand why someone would do this to him. The way I treated his nephew. And now Hamza radiallahu anhu, he goes back. And now, as he goes back to sleep, he's wondering, what have I just done? Right? I mean, it was the spur of the moment. I kind of said it, right? I'm a Muslim. But what does that really mean now? That means that I have to join the Muslims. I have to leave the religion of my Abdul Muttalib, my father, right? And I have to announce that I have nothing to do with idols anymore. So he sits that night and he makes a prayer. And he says, "Oh Allah." And they all believed in Allah, as I mentioned multiple times, but their problem was the idols. He says, "Oh Allah, this decision that I made it in the spur of a moment." Right? Many times we make a decision quickly, not realizing what we're saying and what we're doing. He said, "Oh Allah, if this was a good decision, then allow my heart to be steadfast, ثابت على الإسلام, that it be steadfast on Islam. And if it is otherwise, then oh Allah, find for me a path out of this." And it so happens that the next day, he feels content with Islam. And he goes back to have more discussion with the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. So he goes to the Darul Arqam where the Messenger of Allah ﷺ is. And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ speaks to him and he says, "Hamza, is it not time yet that you accept the message of Allah?" And he recites to him, and Hamza has a discussion with him, and he eventually accepts Islam. And the Muslims, they're so happy and they're so pleased at this, right? That they say aloud takbir, right? When Hamza says his shahada, when he proclaims his faith, to the point that it is heard by everyone around it, right? And Hamza is not scared of facing anyone. So he doesn't want to hide his Islam. So this happens. Hamza is someone whom Allah has now blessed the Muslims with, right? After all of that, all of those tribulations, all those trials, Hamza has been blessed with this. And the Prophet ﷺ is now happy that the Muslims have someone to rely on. It so happens that on the very next night, which was a Thursday night. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ is standing and making dua. And it occurs to him. He makes a dua and he says, Oh Allah, أيد الإسلام بأحد العمرين عمرو بن هشام أو عمر بن الخطاب. Oh Allah, help Islam by one of the two people. And in one narration, بأحبهما إليك, the one that is the most beloved to you from these two, Umar ibn Khattab or Amr ibn Hisham. Right? That was the real name of Abu Jahl. One of these two. Accept my dua and make one of these two a source of help for the Muslims. And it so happens that the very next day, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, it so happens that he is going out, as he would go out every evening, and he says that كنت صاحب خمر في الجاهلية. He says that I was a man I was a drunkard. I would drink a lot, right? أحبها وأسر بها, and I would have my gang, my boys that I would hang with, and I would spend my evenings drinking. So one night I went out where my friends would gather in al-Hazwi, in the market, and I found out that no one is there. So I said, why don't I go to the pub or the bar or wherever everyone gathers to drink? And I find that no one is in the bar as well. The bartender is not there. Nobody is there to serve. So I say, I'm bored. Why don't I go and do tawaf? Right? That's the kind of twisted jahiliyyah that they were in, that you're either drinking or you're either going and doing tawaf. One of the two, right? So he's like, you know what, tonight I won't drink, let's go do tawaf instead. So he goes and he does tawaf. And while he's doing tawaf, he realizes that it's late night and really no one is there. He hears a small humming voice. And it is the voice of the Messenger of Allah reciting the Quran. And Umar, he says that when I heard the voice, I said, Wallahi, لو أني استمعت لمحمد الليلة. You know what, tonight, I'm just going to go and hear what Muhammad has to say. And he comes close to him, and he says that, I find the Messenger of Allah, he's praying between Rukn al-Yamani and the Hijr al-Aswad. When we did the visual presentation, we kind of did a breakdown of the Kaaba. So in simple words, he's praying in a way where he can face the Kaaba and Jerusalem at the same time. And he says that I enter and I hear the Messenger of Allah reciting Quran. And the ayat that were recited, those are the ayat that are being recited. So he said, I'm taken really by surprise at how powerful the Quran is. And the surah that is being recited is Surah Al-Haqqa, right? And for those that know Arabic, you would realize that the surahs that are revealed in Mecca and the surahs that are revealed in Medina, they're very different in their nature. The surahs in Medina, they talk about rulings. They talk about what you can do, what you can't do. The surahs in Mecca, they are very powerful. And there are short verses usually. If you open up the Quran, usually at the top it says at the beginning of that surah that this surah is Makkiyah or Madaniyah. The Makki surahs, they're very small ayat. Al-Haqqa, one ayat. Mal-Haqqa, the second ayat. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا-الْحَاقَّةُ, third ayat. And then there is this prose to it, right? They're all rhymes. Haqqa, you see that ta at the end, that ta sound, it comes out in all of the ayat. So the Prophet ﷺ is reading, and there's a build-up to it, really, right? And just imagine, right? We hear a good qari, right? Whenever maybe we visit, we go for Umrah, or there's some world-renowned qari, and we say, man, I'm just blown away by his recitation. Imagine hearing the tilawah of the Messenger of Allah, right? Imagine how beautiful that must be. And he's blown away by that recitation, and then he can understand it as well. A lot of us, we like the melodious tone, but we don't really understand what's being said. He can understand it, and then the Prophet is reciting, and then you're at the Kaaba. You can imagine the power of that experience if you kind of sit in Umar's shoes and see what he was experiencing. He says that I hear him recite, and it occurs to me that this cannot possibly be something that Muhammad is saying from divine revelation. This is something that he's just making up. So as it so happens that Jibreel is revealing, and Muhammad is reciting Surah Al-Haqqa for the first time, it so happens that Umar is having a conversation with himself. But the ayat, they are in sync with his conversation. So he says to himself that I think this is a form of poetry. And the ayat are coming down. وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ شَاعِرٍ قَلِيلًا مَا تُؤْمِنُونَ. These are not verses of poetry. And very little is that what you can believe in. He says, okay, fine. This must be the magic of a sorcerer. This must be a soothsayer's words. Allah Azza wa Jalla reveals, وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ كَاهِنٍ. These are not the words of a soothsayer. What are they then? تَنزِيلٌ مِّن رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. They are a slow, steady, firm revelation that we send down. It is sent down from the Lord of the world. Well, what if he was to make it up himself? This is Umar's conversation. And you can see how the ayat are correlated. وَلَوْ تَقَوَّلَ عَلَيْنَا بَعْضَ الْأَقَاوِيلِ. And in the very rare case, but the prophets would never do this, but if it comes to your mind, what if in that rare case, the messenger makes something up from himself? وَلَوْ تَقَوَّلَ عَلَيْنَا بَعْضَ الْأَقَاوِيلِ لَأَخَذْنَا مِنْهُ بِالْيَمِينِ ثُمَّ لَقَطَعْنَا مِنْهُ الْوَتِينَ. We would take him by his own hand, and we would take his life by his own hand. We would punish him. فَمَا مِنْكُم مِّنْ أَحَدٍ عَنْهُ حَاجِزِينَ. And none of you could protect him. Umar is convinced now. And then the final verse is وَإِنَّهُ لَتَذْكِرَةٌ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. And it is a reminder for those that have taqwa, those that fear God. And if you don't accept it, what happens? وَإِنَّهُ لَحَسْرَةٌ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. And it will be a source of regret for those that deny it on the Day of Judgment. وَإِنَّهُ لَحَقُّ الْيَقِينَ. And it is an innate truth, something that doesn't even need a proof, right? There's this idea of an innate truth, a fundamental truth. This is what these ayat are. فَسَبِّحْ بِاسْمِ رَبِّكَ الْعَظِيمِ. So go forth praising your Lord. And Umar says, I was so moved by this recitation. رَقَّ قَلْبِي فَبَكَيْتُ. He said, I began to cry. وَدَخَلَنِ الْإِسْلَامُ. And for the first time, Islam began to kind of enter. فَلَمْ أَزَلْ قَائِمًا فِي مَكَانِ ذَلِكَ. So I sat there thinking. And he said that I turned away thinking about Islam. It so happened that the next day, the Quraysh, as they're sitting and as they're talking, they think that all the other measures have taken place now. Everything has been tried. The only thing left to do is to hire someone from the outside, pay him, you're hiring a hitman to finish off the process. Right? Because they can't do it themselves, tribal wars, they'll face a lot of problems. Let's hire someone from outside. And they put a large reward for an anonymous person. And Umar ibn Khattab, he is riled up there. And that other side. So Umar has these two sides going on in him. That side that's softening up, and then that original side in which he's not a Muslim, obviously. That side is getting riled up. And Umar, he says that today, my name will be written in the history of these people, of my people, that I was the one that finished Muhammad. So he took his sword and he sharpened it, and he poisoned his sword, and he headed out towards the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It so happens that while he is there, he comes across a companion. And Abdullah ibn Nakham, radiallahu anhu is his name, he comes across him and he says, Umar, you have your sword yielded in your hand. Where are you headed? He said, to finish this story, to finish off Muhammad. And so Abdullah ibn Nakham, he's scared now, right? Because he knows the Messenger of Allah is praying at the Kaaba, and he knows he's praying at the Kaaba. He knows that Umar would do something wrong. So he says, Umar, why don't you answer my question first? You're going for Muhammad, but what about your own family? Ahlu Baytika, what about your own family? Umar says, what family? What about my family? He says, your own sister is a Muslim. And Umar is taken aback. He doesn't even know his own sister is a Muslim. So he said, you know what? Let me go first take care of my sister. So he heads to his sister's house, Fatima bint al-Khattab, and she is married to Sa'id ibn Zayd. If you remember way back, we spoke about Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufayl, the one man that before the Prophet ﷺ was born, he would save young girls from being buried. Right? That one man, this was his son. And that man, he was such a pure and honest man, you could imagine that in his house, all he had were young girls that he would raise, because he would save them, he would pay people, he'd buy those young girls, and he'd bring them, he'd raise them, he'd give them an education. When he was passing, he said that I was not able to find a messenger, but oh Allah, my son Sa'id, let him find a true messenger if there is. And this is his son Sa'id, married to the sister of Umar. And Khabbab ibn al-Arat, the slave, he is there with them, and he is teaching them the Quran. Right? And immediately you can understand, in this climate of Makkah, education is not left out. Education is the most important thing. It does not matter in which condition you are. Educating yourself, educating your children, learning about your religion is an important thing. These are people that had jobs. These are people that had things to do, but they gave time to learn. And we also learned that the Prophet ﷺ would take a learned person and he would pair them up with someone who does not know. And he would also do that for a new Muslim. This is a big issue that many of us face throughout different Muslim communities, that a non-Muslim accepts Islam, and then we don't have a support system for them. The Prophet ﷺ, he designed in our seerah, there's the ideal support system. You have a financial support system, so each person who is able to afford his expenses and someone else's expenses, they're assigned to a new non-Muslim that is struggling financially. And then there's an educational system as well. If you know something, you go and teach it to someone who doesn't know, right? And the Prophet ﷺ himself taught, but even amongst us, at the end of the day, we all do possess some knowledge. So for those non-Muslims that are coming in, those new Muslims that are coming in, we should be able to take out some time and say that this is what I can do for you. This is what I can share with you. These are my expertise. Whether it be other logistical issues or about Islam, this is what I know, I can help you with this. Offer our services. And this is really the system that the Prophet ﷺ put in place in order for the Muslims to be a community. Because you're not a community if you're not together. If everybody's in their own bubble, you're not a community. So Khabbab is assigned, and they're sitting there. Khabbab is sitting there, and what he comes up with, he's reciting Surah Taha. And he is teaching it to them. And Umar, he comes to the door and he hears them reciting it and he enters, he barges in. And Khabbab runs and hides because Khabbab is a slave, right? So he's scared for his life. And Fatima and Sa'id are sitting there. And Umar, he goes straight to Sa'id, his brother-in-law, and he smacks him on the head. And Sa'id begins to fall down. And he had, the narration mentioned, he hit him with the cover of his sword. Right? So you can imagine, it's still a metal casing, it would cause a significant wound. And his sister Fatima comes in front to stop him, so he ends up hitting her also. Right? He's hitting his brother-in-law, his sister comes in front of him, he ends up hitting his sister also. Right? And then his sister begins to bleed. And then they say together, you know what, Umar? We've accepted Islam. Do what you want to do with us. And when he sees his sister bleeding, and he realizes what he's just done, that soft side of Umar comes out. And he sits down, and he calms down, and he says, tell me what you were reading. And she says, no, I won't tell you. And I won't show you, because you'll disrespect it. He says, no, I'm genuinely interested. Tell me. When someone comes to us genuinely interested, we don't shun them away. We welcome them. He said, okay, show me and let me see what's in it. And then she says, you're impure. Umar is a drunkard, someone that does not know, that is not in a state, because when you're purified, wudu and ghusl is important when we sit to study and learn for our spiritual abilities to comprehend, to take all that in. So Umar, he cleans up himself, he sits and he says, show me. And he sees the verses of Surah Taha. And the first 20 verses are recited and explained to him. And then he reads the verses of Surah At-Takathur. And they move him. Alhaakum At-Takathur. Allah says, you know what's destroying you? At-Takathur. This want in you of getting more. You just want to get more of this world. The Prophet said that if the son of Adam had one valley of gold, he would want 2 valleys of gold. And nothing will fill your stomach except for the dirt of your grave. This takathur. Umar, how long will you just want more dunya and more fame and more this and a better rank in your clan? Hatta zurtumul maqabir, until you visit your grave. And none of that really matters anymore. And Umar is moved and he says, take me to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so Khabbab, he comes out from hiding and he says to Umar, Ya Umar, abshir, Umar, glad tidings to you. I heard the Prophet on Thursday night making this dua that, oh Allah, aid Islam with the help of one of these 2 men, Umar ibn al-Khattab or Amr ibn Hisham, and it seems that you were the one that was chosen. And then Umar would say to Khabbab, take me to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. so I can express my Islam to all the Muslims. And we'll stop and we'll continue here due to the shortage of time, inshallah. And we'll discuss some of the remaining details of that amazing moment when Umar will be the first person to take the Muslims, Hamza and Umar leading them, and for the first time they'll pray in public in the Haram. That amazing emotional moment where all the Muslims are crying because finally they have a support system where they can stand and they can openly, freely practice their religion. Tonight is our prize draw for the month of December. Omar. So as you all know, what we do is that we have 4 Mondays in a month, usually. If any child 18 or under that attends all 4 sessions and checks in, they are put in for a raffle, a prize draw. There's one for the ADS students and there's one for all other students. And then the name is drawn. And let's talk about it. So as always, we have a Seerah book. And for this month I chose, this is Ar-Rahiq al-Makhtoum. It is known as the sealed nectar. Many of you may have it. It is one of the most best-selling books on Seerah. There's a very interesting story behind it. The author is actually was from a village in India in the 70s. And in 1979, the Muslim World League held a competition on the best concise and comprehensive work written on Seerah. And this man was from Mubarakpur in India. For those that are familiar with the subcontinent, Safi Rahman Mubarakpuri. He wrote this from his village and he sent it in. He was awarded first prize, and as a result, he was appointed as a senior faculty member in the Medina University. He died in, I believe, the late 90s or beginning 2000s. His book has been translated into, I think, 20 or 25 languages. One of the most widely read books. This is the latest edition by Darussalam Publishers. If you can see, they redid it, all the graphics and the typesetting is very well. They also revised the translation. So for those that are interested, you can, inshallah ta'ala, buy that as well. And then as always, we have a pair of Apple AirPods, inshallah, hopefully to get the youth to listen to some beneficial Seerah stuff on that, inshallah. So I think we have a few names and then we'll do the drawing.
Assalamu alaikum. So, in order to mention the how we do this every month, based on how the schedule was, we looked at the month of December, and the winner for the month of December is Ishaq Aliga. Can you hear us now?
Takbir.
Takbir. And inshallah, for everyone else, we have pizza downstairs. For everyone, adults and children, everyone will have pizza this time. So inshallah, you can all make your way downstairs.